And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Kenneth Gruenfelder, and as always, it's great to have you guys here on this Wednesday. We have a lot to talk about on today's show, but before we get into that, I just want to remind you guys to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to go to streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. Again, that really helps the show. And for bonus coverage materials that are not covered by this broadcast, make sure to go into patreon.com and search up GSMC Sports Network, and that is where you can find all of our exclusive content from all of our podcasts here on the GSMC Sports Network. So with that, let's get right into the first topic of the show. Well, let's get into the rundown of today's show. So obviously we're going to start off by talking about, at this current moment, who is the best team in the AFC. So we'll get into that in a second. Then we will talk about one of the bigger discussions, debates that's been happening in recent weeks. And for a while, I would say, is Brock Purdy a system quarterback? And obviously, you can make the case both ways. So we'll get into that. In the third topic of the show, we'll talk about the Jets and will they make the playoffs? So we'll get into that. And then we will conclude the show by talking about the NFL stat leaders after Week 6. So that's the rundown for today's show. So let's get into the first topic, which is talking about who is the best team in the AFC. Now, for me, it's between three teams. Right now, I would say it's between the Chiefs, the Dolphins, and the Bills. Now, obviously, two of those teams have played each other already. The Chiefs will play the Dolphins in Germany in a couple of weeks, and the Bills will play the Chiefs at some point during the year, towards the later part of the season. So, we'll get a better idea of how, the Chiefs stack up against those teams. We obviously saw the Bills and the Dolphins play each other earlier this season. And that didn't go so well for the Dolphins. Bills won that game. I think it was, 48-20. I think the score was. So, and that was in Buffalo. Now these two teams do play each other the last game of the regular season, so that could definitely determine who wins the AFC East between those two teams. And I really hope it does, because that would be an awesome game. Yeah. So the final score was 48-20 when they played each other a couple weeks ago. And obviously, the Chiefs and the Bills, they've clashed over the years. Obviously, they met a couple of times in the playoffs, and the Chiefs obviously, won both of those games, the AFC Championship game in 2020, and obviously one of the greatest playoff games that I've ever seen, the AFC Divisional Round in Kansas City. The Chiefs winning that overtime thriller. Gabe Davis had 4 touchdowns in that game. It was unbelievable, right? It was four touchdowns. But regardless, he had a monster playoff game that year. So obviously, looking at I think right now these are the three best teams. The Bengals, they still kind of have to work their way back into that discussion. You have the Ravens there who are respectable as well. But right now I would put the Dolphins, the Bills, and the Chiefs as like the top three at the moment. Now the Bills offensively, the last couple of weeks, in London it was kind of a rough game. They really didn't get going until, the fourth quarter against the Jags in London. And obviously, they did struggle to score points against the Giants. They didn't score their points until the fourth quarter in that game either. Well, they at least scored, some points before the fourth quarter against the Jags. They waited till the fourth quarter to score all their points against the Giants, who are not a very good team. And obviously, these teams have all these teams have their issues. The Bills, they're dealing with some injuries on defense, and the last couple of weeks the offense has kind of struggled a bit. The Dolphins, their defense, isn't really the best. They were down 14-0 to the Panthers at one point, but then hey, they held them to, well, then again, that was a pick six that the Panthers had, but then they went on this, outscored the Panthers 42-7 the rest of the way. So not to say that the Dolphins defense is bad by any means. There's that. And also, I think Tua Tagovailoa has had a great season, but I don't look at him as like one of the elite quarterbacks in the league. I think he is a solid quarterback. But I still have my concerns with him. But he's having a great season. He's having an MVP season as well. And then obviously you look at the Chiefs. Their offense has kind of been struggling this year. They're looking to, figure it out on offense themselves. But right now they're 5-1, same record as the Dolphins. So I mean, every team has got their issues, But that's just what I could think of when it comes to all those teams. And obviously the Dolphins, I mean, they suffered their loss against a team that they're fighting for the division. So that kind of knocked them off a little bit, but they got back on the right track. So currently, like, who is the best team right now in the AFC? And obviously, I think we'll get a clearer picture once we see the Chiefs play against the Bills and the Dolphins. But right now, I would probably have to put the Bills and the Chiefs ahead of the Dolphins because of the quarterback. I just think that's kind of what separates these three teams is the quarterbacks. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes hasn't been like spectacular, but he's gotten off to a good start this year, and he hasn't really had to play hero ball. The one thing that's concerning is some of his interceptions have been, I mean, it's been bad. Some of the picks that he's thrown, but you know what? I think when he's going to have to play hero ball, that's what he's going to do. I mean, right now he's got close to 1,600 yards passing, 11 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. But and the Chiefs have played in a lot of close games this year outside of the blowout against the Bears. The Broncos game got close at one point. I mean, they were up 16-0, then it was 16-8. They kicked the field goal, so they won by 2 scores. But, I mean, at one point that game was a 1-score game. I mean, they beat the Jets by 3, the Vikings by 7. They lost to the Lions by 1. They beat the Jags by 8, and the Jags have been playing better. So, if these two teams meet again, what is the outcome going to be different? I mean, it's probably going to be an Arrowhead, so it probably is going to still be the Chiefs winning. But, I think the Chiefs, they're still trying to figure it out. The Bills, they're kind of struggling. The last 2 weeks have been struggling on offense, but, again, I think they'll figure it out. I mean, they were the best team in football, coming off of that win against the Dolphins. It's just, I think with what happened in London, it's going to I mean, that stuff's going to happen. It's a long season, so and obviously struggling on offense, they'll be able to figure it out. So I'm not worried about them. It's just, is Josh Allen going to cut down on the turnovers? That's one of the things that, that concerns me. I just think it is between the Chiefs and the Bills right now. The Chiefs, they still got to get going offensively. But I think ultimately they're going to figure it out. And again, I don't want to discredit the Dolphins. I think the Dolphins can hang with both teams. Again, we'll see how the Bills and the Dolphins, what happens at the end of the year, because that game's in Miami. But, the Bills definitely showed you something when they crushed the Dolphins in that game in Buffalo. Because I think a lot of people just kind of, discounted them and they counted them out. But, that definitely showed you something. So, it's kind of tough to say because, again, all these teams have their flaws. But I'd probably give the edge to either the Chiefs or the Bills right now at this particular moment. Just because of who's at quarterback and especially because of what the Bills did against the Dolphins a couple weeks ago. Now, the Bills, they did beat the Chiefs in the regular season last year. They do play the Chiefs tough. So I'm curious to see how this match coming up this year is going to go. And obviously we'll preview it when we get to it. But I think if the Chiefs figure it out on offense, I think they kind of pull away from the Bills. Because the way their defense has been playing very well this year. And I think that's something that, that's been their weakness. and obviously they did win the Super Bowl last year. But, I mean, since Patrick Mahomes has been drafted, I mean, the weakness of the Chiefs has been their defense. I mean, he's had to, play hero ball and put up 30, 40 points a game because the defense just, at times can't stop anybody. But, I think especially, with this game coming up against the Chargers, who have a high-powered offense, I mean, we'll see what they do against the Chargers. And like, listen, they lost to the Lions by a point, but, the Chiefs could have won that game. They definitely could have, if not for all the drops in that game. And 7 points, was off of a pick six. So, I mean, listen, they did what they could do against the Lions, who have one of the best offenses in the NFL. So, I mean, when they go up against the Dolphins and the Bills, let's see how that defense performs against them. And we'll see, like, is the offense going to finally wake up and say, hey, we got to keep up with these guys, And I expect the Chiefs to try to, maybe get another wide receiver in that wide receiver room because that's one of their weaknesses too. And they had most of these guys last year for the Super Bowl run, but they got to get another receiver in there. They just have to. But I know I don't like putting the Dolphins at three, but again, based off of what the Bills did to them a couple weeks ago, let's see what they do against the Chiefs. And Tua and Mahomes have played each other before. That was back in 2020, believe it or not. The Dolphins actually almost came back in that game. And now they got Tyreek Hill. So, but I don't think, like, the gap is definitely closer with these teams as opposed to, well, again, the gap got a little bit closer after this week with the teams in the NFC. But, before that, I mean, the 49ers were, like, here and everybody else was kind of, below them. With these teams in the AFC, it's close. And there might be even more teams that are going to close the gap. Because you still have the Ravens and you got the Bengals who are just, going to figure it out. And obviously we know the Bengals have had success against Mahomes and they obviously beat Josh Allen in the playoffs last year. They they did play the Dolphins, but Tua got hurt early in that game, so we didn't really get to see Burrow and Tua going at it. So, I mean, we're just going to have to wait and see. But let me know what you guys think. Who, in your opinion, is the best team in the AFC right now? So that's basically it when talking about this topic. So with that, we are going to take our first break of the show. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about something that is controversial. And that is whether or not Brock Purdy is a system quarterback. And, there's been a lot of discussion about it. Obviously, First Take did a topic on it yesterday. So that'll be what we talk about. But again, let me know what you guys think. In your opinion, who is the best quarterback or the best? I keep saying that. I keep doing that. I did that in the open. But who is the best team in the AFC? Let me know what you guys' thoughts are on that. So when we come back from our first break of the show, we will discuss Brock Purdy and whether or not he is a system quarterback. So stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.